He saved America from financial collapse twice, but when he died, the man who controlled more wealth than the United States Treasury was found clutching a locket of his dead daughter's hair, alone in a Roman hotel room, still afraid of the dark. John Pierpont Morgan didn't start powerful. He started sick. Sickly child, scarlet fever, rheumatic fever, seizures that terrified his mother and made his father wonder if the boy would survive to adulthood. The other children played. Pierpont stayed inside, watching through windows, learning that the world was dangerous and bodies were weak, and the only thing you could trust was money, because money didn't get sick. His father was a banker in Hartford, Connecticut, respectable but not wealthy, and the boy absorbed one lesson early. If you don't control the room controls you. He never forgot that. Not when his face began to swell and redden with a skin disease called rosacea that would eventually disfigure him. Not when girls looked away. Not when he looked in mirrors and saw a monster growing where a young man should have been. So he stopped trying to be liked. He decided to be necessary instead. At 24, Morgan was sent to New York to represent his father's interests. He was awkward, physically imposing but socially stunted. That nose, bulbous and inflamed, made people uncomfortable. He made them more uncomfortable by refusing to smile, to charm, to soften his presence. Where other men in finance performed friendliness, Morgan performed inevitability. You either dealt with him or you didn't deal at all. It wasn't confidence, it was something colder, a kind of preemptive rejection. I will judge you before you judge me. I will dominate you before you humiliate me. In 1861, he financed his first deal, bought 5,000 rifles from an Army arsenal for $3 each, sold them back to the Union Army for $22 each. Defective rifles, some exploded in soldiers' hands. Morgan made his first fortune while men died holding faulty weapons he'd sold them. When confronted, he didn't deny it. He said it was legal. And it was. That's what haunted people about him. He wasn't breaking rules. He simply understood that rules were written by people who didn't think ahead, and fortunes were made in the space between what's legal and what's moral. But profit didn't calm him. It never does. He married a woman named Amelia Sturgis, called her Mimi, loved her desperately in his cold, inarticulate way. 4 months after the wedding, she began coughing, tuberculosis. He took her to Europe, trying to outrun death with money. It didn't work. She died in his arms in the south of France. He was 24. He brought her body back to New York and buried her, and after that, something in him closed. He remarried, had children, but everyone who knew him said the same thing. He was present, but not there, devoted, but distant. A man performing the motions of family, while his mind was always elsewhere, calculating, controlling, building walls around the one thing he couldn't afford to lose again, himself. The thing about Morgan wasn't intelligence. Plenty of men were smarter. It was certainty. He looked at chaos and saw structure, looked at competition and saw waste. In the 1880s and 90s, American industry was a war zone. Railroads bankrupting each other with rate wars. Steel companies burning capital to steal market share. Morgan hated it, not because it was cruel, but because it was inefficient. So he started buying them. Railroads first. He didn't just acquire track and trains, he acquired the men. Sat them in his library on Madison Avenue, that famous library with the red velvet chairs and the ceiling painted with zodiac signs. And he made them wait, hours sometimes. Then he'd walk in, say nothing, sit down, and stare. That stare, people said it was like being x-rayed. He wouldn't negotiate. He'd simply tell you what was going to happen, and the force of his presence made disagreement feel like suicide. He called it Morganization, taking warring companies and forcing them into trusts, into peace, into monopoly. He did it with railroads, then steel, when he bought Andrew Carnegie's empire and created U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar corporation. He wasn't building businesses, he was building order, his order. A world where nothing moved without his approval, because a world that moved on its own was a world that could hurt you. But every act of control created new enemies. Newspapers called him a robber baron. Cartoonists drew him as an octopus, tentacles wrapped around the Capitol. Theodore Roosevelt, the trust-buster president, despised him and launched investigations. Morgan didn't care, or he pretended not to. He'd sit in his library at night, alone, smoking gigantic cigars, playing solitaire with oversized cards because his hands shook and normal cards were too small. The man who controlled American capitalism was terrified of being alone in the dark. He kept lights burning in every room, traveled with companions just to avoid silence, collected art obsessively, rare manuscripts, Gutenberg Bibles, Renaissance paintings, filling his homes with beautiful things made by dead people because the living kept disappointing him. Then came 1907, a financial panic, banks failing, markets collapsing. The United States had no central bank, no Federal Reserve yet, so the government came to Morgan, begged him, and for 10 days he became the central bank, locked bankers in his library, told them which firms would survive and which would die, organized a bailout using his own money and his own authority. He saved the economy, but the cost was silence. No one thanked him publicly because admitting that one man held that much power was admitting democracy was a fiction. He was 70. His son Jack ran the day-to-day operations now, but Morgan couldn't let go, wouldn't let go. He kept working because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. His first wife, Mimi, his daughter Louisa dead from typhoid fever, his other children alive but strangers to him because he never learned how to be soft, his mistresses in Europe paid for but never known. All that power, all that wealth, and the people closest to him felt miles away. In 1912, he testified before Congress, the Peugeot Committee, investigating the Money Trust. They asked him if he controlled American finance. He said no, not technically. Then they asked, what's the basis of commercial credit? And Morgan said, character. Not money, not collateral, character. As if the man who destroyed competitors and built monopolies and let soldiers die with faulty rifles still believed in some 19th century myth of honor. Maybe he did. Maybe that's what made it tragic. He actually thought he was the good guy. He died a year later, in Rome, collecting more art he didn't need. His body was brought back on a ship, and his estate was valued at $75 million. Enormous, but not as much as people thought. Turned out most of the wealth was just control, just influence, just the ability to make other people's money move. He owned less than people feared, or maybe he just hid it better. His son tried to fill the role. Couldn't. No one could. The world didn't need a king anymore. It needed a system. So they built one. The Federal Reserve, central banks, regulations, all designed to make sure no one man could ever be J.P. Morgan again. But here's the thing they don't tell you. The night he died, they found him holding that locket, his daughter's hair inside. A man who built empires, who bent presidents and bankrupted rivals, clutching a piece of a child who never got to grow up. He spent his whole life controlling everything he could see, and none of it protected him from the one thing that mattered. He was so afraid of weakness that he became invincible. And invincibility, it turns out, is just another word for alone.